Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So my name's Katie and today we are going to be doing my December wrap up. I forgot what year it was, no, what month it was. And yes, so this is the final wrap up of 2020. Might want to get a cup of tea and a snack because this wrap up will probably be quite long as usual. I think I read, how many books did I read? I read 20? Yeah, I read 19 books in December, but plus 2 more because I read them in November but didn't include them in the November wrap up. So yeah, we're going to be talking about 21 books today, so I have to rattle through them. Yeah, but anyway, I hope you enjoy. I always love filming wrap ups and they're kind of a shorter film, but also I feel like I have so much fun talking about all the books I read. And yeah, and I read some really good books actually this month. So yes, without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so the first one I read was called The Bone Ships, and this is the sequel to The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. And I really enjoyed this series. So the second one obviously is a sequel, but I just feel like it built on so many of the strengths of the first book. So we're following Joron, who's like this grumpy pirate, and he's kind of in the pirate ship, and his pirate ship gets taken over by Lucky Mace, who's this like kind of powerful figure. And she sort of whips the crew into shape and gets them all sort of, yeah, working well. And then we end up in this kind of piratey drama, and there's like all these battles between ships. And so basically it's kind of a fight to hunt down, this is in the first one, this last Kishan, who is like a sea dragon, and they're used to sort of make the bone ships. But then at the end of the last book there's kind of a twist in like the crew and stuff, and yeah, it all goes down. And so then in this book we're sort of following again what happened and just we're finding out more about the kind of world and the lore. And there's these characters called the Gullamain, who are these like, I can't picture them, but I almost picture them like humans with beaks. And they are so cute. And so in the first book we only know one of them, but in the second book we get to know more of them and just finding out more about their like culture and how they tie into the story. And I love them. And yeah, and we find out there's like almost two types of Gullamain, and then there's this one who like attaches himself to the original Gullamain and like becomes his bodyguard, but the original Gullamain like hates him. But then just throughout the book, and they're so precious. And yeah, I just really love that kind of dynamic, and like watching Joron grow into this like, yeah, and there's so many, and the plot's like so good as well. And yeah, so I really enjoyed the series. I feel like I think I gave it 4.5 stars because it's not quite a 5-star like feel, but it's still like a really solid series. Like I couldn't probably tell you like a flaw with the book. I feel like for me 5 stars sometimes just a feeling, but yeah, it's so good. And like the things that go down towards the end and just it's so dramatic, and it's kind of hard. I don't really want to talk about the plot because I feel like that would sort of ruin the first one. But it was amazing. So I would really recommend, especially if you've read the first one and liked it, the second one's just as good, if not better. Yeah, and then after that I read The Split, which was an arc. So I think this comes out in about March, and I requested this on NetGalley because it's set in the city where I live. So obviously I wanted to read it, and it's a sapphic romance as well. And I had so much fun reading this. I gave this one 4.5 stars also. But yeah, so we're following the main character. I think she's called Emily, or maybe that's her love interest. No, that's her ex. We'll just call it Emily. So yeah, so she has this breakup with her girlfriend, and she like runs away with the cat. So she like takes the cat with her. And oh no, she's called Alex. I think she's called Alex actually, not Emily. Yeah, so she takes the cat with her and she runs away to go and live with her dad just for a bit while she kind of sorts her life out. And then when she's there back with her dad, she has this friend from childhood, and they sort of like become friends again. Alex also gets this job in a bakery, so that's kind of that storyline, because Alex she was a teacher but she didn't really find her passion with that. She always loved baking, so she wants to be a baker. And then so Alex and her friend, whose name I also can't remember, they sign up to run this marathon. And so I think it's so Alex can impress her ex-girlfriend, because she still very much wants to be with her because her girlfriend dumped her. So yeah, and also they write these such funny emails about coming to collect the cat, and it's so funny. So then they join this like running club with this like coach called Jo, who like, yeah, Jo's very like perky, and she's really kind of enthusiastic, and like her and Alex sort of have this having this kind of flirtatious dynamic, which maybe blossoms into more throughout the book. But yeah, but also Alex is still very much hung up on her ex, and you sort of can see how that like impacts her, but also throughout the book realizing that maybe the relationship was kind of toxic. Just like watching her grow was really good. And then her dynamic with her best friend as well, I love that. I always love like friendships in books, and I really like the kind of almost, as well as the like romance part of it, there was almost like the kind of friendship soulmate type story as well, which I really loved, and the kind of queer solidarity. Yeah, so it was a really fun romance and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I would highly recommend. Okay, so the next I read Daughter of Smoke and Mone, which was a reread for me, and this was for our live show. I gave this one 3.75 stars. So I really like the series overall, but the first one like was never my favourite, and I think on reread I liked it more. But I feel like there's this section of the book which I always find, which especially the first time I found quite jarring. But actually on reread I found it a bit more kind of, once you kind of understand it, I feel like it makes a lot more sense. But I feel like I'm not the hugest fan of the romance in the book, and that's why I didn't get a high rating. But that said, I really love the setting and the sort of, and Carew, the main character, she's amazing. So in the first book we're kind of following her, and she's living in Prague, and she's kind of attending this art school, and then one day these mysterious like angels show up, and yeah, so it's kind of that, but also so there's this angel which takes an interest in her. It's very kind of 2012 YA type vibes, but also it's really well written. I love Laini Taylor's writing, and I love the Prague setting. And Carew has a friend called Zuzana who is iconic. She's like tiny but fierce. And yeah, and also there's this whole like magic system around like teeth and kind of necromancy, almost not necromancy, resurrection. And Carew's kind of family are these kind of mysterious like creatures called chimera, who you kind of find out more about throughout the book. So yeah, so I feel like it's a solid start to the series, but I definitely like the later 2 books in the series more, and I'm excited to read them for our read along. So yeah, so I enjoyed the first one, but yeah, it's not my favourite. Then after that I read A Dark and Hollow Star, which was an arc, and that comes out in February, I believe. Which was so good. I gave this one 4.5 stars, and I really love it. It's like so we're following 4 characters, like 4 main characters, and it's kind of set partly in Toronto and partly in Nevada, I think. So in Toronto it's like the home of the Fae Court, and we're following Arlo, who at the start of the book, she's kind of, it takes place in this ceremony type thing, which is kind of deciding whether she's going to be a fae or a human, because she's kind of half and half, what's the word, half blood, I don't know. And so, but then it gets postponed, so because I don't know, there's some like drama or something. So yeah, so Arlo's kind of a bit torn about this, and then she sort of ends up getting involved in sort of this kind of mystery that's going on. And the other main characters are also involved. So we're also following Nausicaa, and she used to be a Fury, but she sort of gets banished. So she's now kind of living as a mortal. So, and she also then comes into the plot. And then we're also following these other 2 characters, whose names I've forgotten. Oh no, my brain's just blank today. One of whom is like this prince type character, and he's very interesting. He's a very like sweet character, but also his like mother is very abusive, and she's kind of very like manipulative. And then his sort of bodyguard type character, who's this other kind of fae. So most of the fae are like the seedy, I don't quite know how to say it, and then but he's a lady, like lady. I can't pronounce fae things. And so he has a slightly different kind of power, but he's also this like very kind of angsty bodyguard who's like in love with the prince, but also so they're kind of in love with each other, but they don't want to admit it, and like cause all this drama, and that dynamic is so good. And then also Arlo and Nausicaa, they kind of get into like a relationship type thing, which I love. Their relationship, it's so precious. It's like the kind of grumpy like badass warrior, and then Arlo, who's this kind of sweet, slightly dorky main girl. And I feel like it really mirrors well the sort of typical angsty bad boy, but there's like a twist because she's a girl, so it's like a sapphic, which I always love. And yeah, and so these 4 characters sort of end up involved in this mystery that's going on, because these Iron Blood Fae, who are like a special type of Fae, or no, maybe they're not Fae actually, just the Iron Bloods, so they're kind of like magicians, they are being murdered. So it's trying to investigate what's going on, but the council, the like fake council, aren't really taking it seriously. So our characters sort of take it into their own hands, and it's just really good. I feel like if you like kind of Sarah J Maas but wish it was a bit more queer, then yeah, you definitely really like this book. It's so fun. I love the kind of modern type Fae setting, and I feel like it really sort of sparked my imagination. Like I was imagining little stories for these characters, and yeah, and also the kind of ending, I feel like it has a lot of promise for the next book. Just I love the whole sort of like manipulative vibes. And there's this character called Hero, who at first I thought I was gonna love, because obviously Hero from Archive of the Forgotten, I love him, but then Hero kind of turns out to be not a very nice character. Yeah, I really shouldn't judge whether I'm gonna like a character based on their name, but it's really interesting, and it's almost a bit of a Frankenstein type story with like, yeah, and then there's also the sort of Wild Hunt type characters, and they're sort of pulling the strings a bit, which is really good, and there's some like gods in. Oh yeah, it's really good. Yes, I really enjoyed that. I feel like there were a few things which maybe just, I don't know, I feel like it could have been a little bit like tighter overall, but I think this is the author's like debut book, so I'm very willing to forgive. Then after that I read From Blood and Ash and Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which I gave both 5 stars, just because, okay, so they're not like literary masterpieces, but I just had so much fun reading these books. Yeah, I was reading them like as audiobooks, and I was kind of reading them on my like commute, and I just always smiling, and just the romance, I was so invested. It's like, and they're so over the top and so dramatic, and just things will keep happening, and just when you think it can't get any more dramatic, suddenly something else will happen that's just more like and it's just like watching kind of a slightly trashy TV show, like a CW show or something, or like a soap opera, and you just get so invested. I feel like if you're going to read them, you have to know what you're getting, because you're not going to get like a fantasy masterpiece. It's very much like romance driven, but I was so invested in the romance, and yeah, just the kind of angst and like drama of it all, I just love. And yeah, so we're following Poppy, who's this maiden, and she's sort of been raised from birth to be kind of, she's very isolated, and she's going to have this ascension. So in the world there's these people called the Ascended, so Poppy's gonna ascend basically, and she's been kind of sheltered in preparation for ascending, because she's been told she's like special or whatever. But then one day this bodyguard comes along called Hawk, and he gets like assigned to Poppy because Poppy's previous bodyguard gets murdered. So yeah, so Poppy and Hawk have this like banter and dynamic going on, and it's obviously very like relationship, and it gets a bit steamy, and the steamy scenes in these series are so good, especially if like Kingdom of Flesh and Fire is like a non-stop smut, but also the angst, and it turns into a bit of a fake, like not fake dating, but almost like, yeah, kind of like fake relationship type thing, but they like so they're in a fake relationship, but then they're pretending on the outside, and then they're pretending to hate each other with each other, but then deep down you know they like love each other. So just the layers. And yeah, the monsters are cool as well. So, and also it's vampires, so which I didn't realise. So yeah, certain characters turn out to be kind of vampires basically, which is really cool. And then we also get like werewolf type characters as well, especially in the second book. So I think the second book we get a lot more of kind of friendships, and there's this other character called Kieran who I love, and he's such a precious character, but also I love him, and I kind of want like an OT3 dynamic, but I don't know if it'll happen, but there's a potential, because there's this like ritual thing which might involve them all. So yeah, and just the twists and the turns, and just yeah, it's like drama filled, but it's so satisfying. So I just had the best time reading them. Yeah. Then after that I read the Henna Wars, and this was an arc, but I believe it's already out, but I think it gets published like properly in the UK in January, so that's why I read it as an arc. And I really enjoyed this one as well. I gave it 4 stars. So we're following the main character Nisha, and she's very comfortable in herself, in her sexuality as a lesbian, but she hasn't told her parents yet. So at the start of the book she tells her parents, but it kind of goes a bit wrong and they sort of start ignoring her. And so yeah, so then kind of parallel to that, there's this business competition at school. So Nisha decides to start like a henna business, because that's like a major part of her culture. So, but at the same time, these other 2 characters, one called Flavia and one called China, which is a ridiculous name. There's like that, the backstory behind the name was so funny. It's like so kind of, yeah, anyway. They also start a henna business, but Nisha gets very annoyed about this because it's kind of, it's her culture and she feels like they're appropriating, which they kind of are. So yeah, but then Nisha and Flavia sort of have a little budding flirtation going on as well, so that kind of adds an extra element of complication. And then also Nisha has a really interesting relationship with her sister, like they're really close and her sister's really supportive. And I feel like that's almost the main relationship of the book, like between her and her sister, and like their dynamic and certain things which are kept secret but get revealed later on. Yeah, and sort of the betrayal. And I feel like Nishat's a very interesting character, especially for like a YA book. It's quite frustrating, and I feel like she's very like typically teenager. Like she's very kind of self-righteous, but she's sort of, and in some situations you know she's kind of right, but I feel like she's going about it in the wrong way with how she sort of expresses her self, and like her kind of, she becomes quite self-centered, but I feel like it's quite nice throughout the book she sort of realises, but she also knows kind of how to stand up for herself and her worth, but at the same time sometimes she takes it a bit too far. So I feel like it's an interesting kind of balance, and she's sort of learning that. I think it's a really good YA contemporary, and I think it's really good to have out there, especially for young queer teens of colour. Yeah. Okay, then after that I read Victories Greater Than Death by Charlie Jane Anders, and this is another arc. I think it comes out in April, and to be honest I only requested this because of the cover, because it was so pretty. But I actually was surprised by how much I enjoyed this one. What did I give this one? I gave it 3.75/4 stars. So I hadn't read her other book, which I think is like City in the Middle of the Night or something, which I think is relatively like popular in the kind of sci-fi world, but I really enjoyed this one. It was a really fun ride. I feel like it reads quite like YA, which I think it is a YA. But we're following this character called Tina, and she basically finds out at the start of the book she's like this clone of a really important like battle commander. And she sort of gets taken onto the ship with her best friend called Rachel. And so they sort of end up on this ship and embroiled in this like intergalactic kind of war thing. And they have the idea to like recruit some more humans from Earth. So then they recruit these other 4 like kids to come onto the ship and help them, because there's this bad guy whose name I can't remember, but he's like very much out to get Tina, and he has this like thing where if he touches people he like destroys them, and it sort of corrupts the memory of them, so then everyone thinks they hated the person that just died. So they're kind of fighting this evil guy. So it's quite like a classic type space battles against evil. But yeah, the character dynamics are really good. I love the friendship between Tina and Rachel, and then there's also a sapphic relationship as well. I can't remember the name of the girl, but yeah, between her and Tina, which is really good. And I just love the whole like found family type, found friendship group of the kids in this thing. And then also Tina's kind of feeling of like, she feels like she has to live up to this legacy of the person she's the clone of, but also she kind of realizes that she's her own person as the book goes on, and that's a nice arc. And then she sort of comes into her like own. Yeah, so it's really fun. I feel like it took me a little while to get into just like fully invested, and it was quite, I would have liked maybe a bit more, like especially around the kind of relationship. It was quite like fast paced, so I think I would have just liked a little bit more, which I often feel, especially with YA, just I just want more. And more sort of development with the sort of politics of the like intergalactic world. Yeah. Okay, then after that I read another arc, which comes, I was trying to get through all my arcs because my goal was to get my NetGalley to 100% by the end of the year. I didn't quite get there because I still have 3 left, but you know, I almost made it. So that was Lava Red Feather Blue, and this was one which really surprised me with how much I loved it. This one 4 stars, maybe 4.5, I don't know, but this one was just really fun. It was like very like fae and kind of almost a bit Sarah J Maas-esque, but like, so, and it's, I think it's kind of a Sleeping Beauty retelling. There's this prince who, at the start of the book, Prince Larkin, so at the start of the book he put to sleep in this kind of arrangement with this evil fae called Ulakana. And so, yeah, so then, and then the book kind of skips forward to 200 years later, where we're following the main character, and he accidentally wakes up this prince, which then sort of drama ensues from there. And so they sort of end up kind of on the run because the like government of the time want the prince for like their own ends. And then also by waking the prince, he inadvertently wakes the Ulakana, who's like the evil fairy. And yeah, it's set all on this island which is kind of hidden from the rest of the world. And on the island the kind of humans and fae sort of live together, and there's quite a lot of tension between the humans and the fae. But it's kind of been managed, but then with the waking up of the prince and the evil fairy sort of kicks off again all the drama. So then the main character and the prince have to then kind of go into fairy on this quest to try and like save the world or save the island. And then there's a bit of a romance between them, which was really enjoyable. And just the kind of angst as well and Larkin as well, the prince, he's kind of very old-fashioned and he's having to like adjust to this modern world. And it was really fun like ride, and just the classic kind of 3 trials in the fae world. And yeah, seeing the characters kind of grow and like grow from each other. And there's some really good side characters as well, like the main character's sibling called Cassidy. They were really cool. And their daughter, she was really sweet. And also the father and the mother, so they're half fae, the main character, whose name I keep forgetting. It will come to me eventually, like 2 hours after I film the wrap up. Yeah, so that's also an interesting dynamic. No, I really enjoyed it. I feel like it didn't quite have a 5-star feeling, hence the 4 stars. But yeah, I still really enjoyed it and would definitely recommend, especially if you like fae. It was really fun. Okay, then after that I read The Galaxy in the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, which I was so excited to get an art for this. Oh, and I love this one so much. I gave it 5 stars, obviously. And I think it's probably tied favourite with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet for my favourite Becky Chambers book. Just because I feel like this one just had so many sort of like heartwarming messages, and just the kind of whole, I feel like it was just a really good remedy to the year that was 2020. Oh yeah, I just love the characters, and it's really interesting actually in this book because we don't really follow any humans. They're all kind of alien species, but we're kind of following, so we're following this like sort of hotel type thing called the 5 Hop 1 Stop, and it's on this planet which is kind of a stopover planet between this, there's like this area where there's lots of like holes, like gates, worm gates or whatever they're called. And people will often kind of be arriving and they'll have a few hours before their next gate opens, so they'll kind of stop over in this sort of hotel type thing. And it's run by a woman called Ulu and her child Tuppo. And oh, I love Tuppo so much. But yeah, so at the time, so there's 3 characters who are currently sort of in the like hotel thing. It's not quite a hotel, I don't really know the best way to describe it. And when suddenly like all the communications like in orbit sort of shut down and everyone gets trapped where they are, so these 5 characters are then sort of thrust together, and there's quite a lot of sort of tensions between them because they're all from different races. So Ulu's very much trying to like cater for everyone and make sure everyone's looked after. And then we're also following Pei, who is the girlfriend of Ashby. So we've kind of met her a little bit previously, but it was really nice finding out more about her, and I loved her. She's now one of my like favourite characters, like Becky Chambers characters, or even just characters in general, and just her kind of wants and her struggles, because she feels like she's being unfair to Ashby, having to keep their relationship secret, but also it's a huge taboo in like her culture. The Alons, they like look down on relationships with humans, so that's like a really interesting thing going on there. And then we also have Raera, who is I can't remember, he's Quailen, and the Quailens are quite an interesting species because we don't know a lot about them. They're quite secretive, but Raera's been kind of exiled, so we find out more about him. And then also this other character called what's she called, Speaker. Yeah, Speaker. So she's part of a race called the Arak, and they're very like not very known, and I can't even really remember learning about them in any of the other books. And so she's quite timid around the other races because she's scared they're gonna kind of treat her badly, but also she has quite a lot of sort of friction with Pei because she doesn't like the Alons, and how she's very, so Speaker is very kind of peacekeepery, and she is trying to like, but she doesn't like how Pei's kind of this like war captain thing. So yeah, so we're sort of following these 5 strangers. Well, Ulo and Tuppo aren't strangers with each other, but the principle stands. And just the sort of kind of how they like come together and how they sort of learn to like get along with each other and respect each other and respect each other's kind of cultures. And yeah, they're all such great characters, and Becky Chambers just excels at writing kind of the like comforting that makes you just believe in like humanity and people and spirit, and just and yeah, and just watching them kind of team, like go from sort of being these strangers to kind of team up and working together. And yeah, it's just so many great messages. And there's a few more things that I would say, and I think I did write them about them in my like Goodreads review, but they're a bit spoilery, so I don't really want to say them. But just yeah, and also I feel like it's a good like book that looks at kind of the kind of almost forced slowing down of this like really busy world, and like people are living their lives, but sometimes it's really good just to kind of take, even if it's like forced upon you, which I feel like almost happened a bit in 2020, to just take this break. And like how healing that can be for like your soul. So yeah, I just love it. So yeah, and Becky Chambers writing. Then after that I read The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb, which I gave 4.5 stars. So this is the second book in the Live Ship Traders series, and this is kind of a series where we're following the Vestrids, who are like this trader family, and they own a live ship. So live ships are like these sentient ships, and we're just kind of there's a lot of drama within the Vestrid family, which is kind of the first book follows. And then also this pirate called Kenneth, who is like trying to unite all the pirates and become this like pirate king. And then in the second book we're just kind of following on from the first one and the events that happened at the start of the first one. And I feel like this book just, it's a really great kind of character study of these characters and the sort of things that are happening to them. And I love the sort of sea type setting. And in this one there's quite a bit of, they're building this other ship called the Paragon, who's this ship that previously went mad and like killed all its passengers and its crew. And they're trying to like re-sail the Paragon to go and rescue some other characters who were sort of taken captive at the first book. But also this book, I feel like the characters are so well crafted and so kind of subtle, and certain characters you just really change your mind on. So in this book there's a character called Malta, who I really didn't like in the first one. She was like such a brat, but this one, like as the book went on, I was like, firstly I started to get a bit of like love to hate her, and then I started to get like fond of her and then I was just really proud of her by the end. Like yeah, I just did a complete like 180 on her character. And also her dynamic with, so she's kind of has this sort of courtship type thing going on with this character called Rain, who is like a rain wilder, and they're these sort of mysterious like people who live like up the river in the like jungle, and but they're very like powerful, and they sort of supply the like live wood, so they have this deal with the traders. Yeah, and I really loved her and Rain dynamic. I don't know if I should have found it so funny, but I did. So yeah, and I really like that storyline, and also her dynamic with Kefri and Ronica. So Kefri is Malta's mother and Ronica is her grandmother. And I love their storyline so much. It's just these kind of women like taking into their own hands their like kind of fate and the fate of their sort of men, and them really sort of yeah, just owning their power and owning what they can do. And I think Malta really learns that lesson, like the kind of sacrifices she has to make for like her family and the people she cares about, and she can't just like stomp a foot and say I want this and I want that. She has to really sort of become this almost selfless character. And then there's what Althea, I feel like she kind of frustrated me a little bit in this book, but also I feel like I don't think it's Althea really fault. I think it's Rarshan. Like, why is she like, there's this character called Greg who like, so Althea's kind of, she's like lusting after this Barshan, and Barshan's just absolute trash, and then Greg's is just a really sweet little puppy. I'm like, why wouldn't she be with him? But yeah, no, it's a really good series, and I feel like Robin Hobb's so good at kind of crafting characters and like crafting this world, and her writing is very sort of relaxing to read. I can't think of a better way to describe it, but yeah, so I'm really enjoying the series and I'm excited for the last one. Okay, then next I read The Raven and the Reindeer by T.J. Kingfisher, and this one someone actually recommended to me in the comments, and I just thought it sounded really good, so I just immediately wanted to read it because I think it said it was like a sapphic Snow Queen retelling, which I just loved, and I really enjoyed this one. What did I give it? I gave it 4 stars. 4 stars, yeah. It was just really good, and it was very like, it felt very much like reading a fairy tale or like a folk tale, but yeah, no, I just really enjoyed it, and it was very like, yeah, very like classic fairy tale-y, and I love the kind of sapphic twist, and just so the main character, we're following her, and she sort of, her like childhood best friend gets like taken away by the Snow Queen, so then she goes to try and rescue him, but she sort of has her journey like thwarted, and so first she gets kind of taken in by this witch, and she sort of ends up in this house which she doesn't realise and wastes away like 7 months, and then she ends up with these kind of like bandit people where she meets this other girl, and they sort of have a relationship, and the relationship was so cute, and yeah, and then eventually they go and kind of confront the Snow Queen, and it was just a really great like Christmassy, wintry type little, it wasn't that long, it was, I think it was only about 200 pages, but or maybe even shorter than that, but yeah, it was really good. I just had a lot of fun reading it, and obviously, as always, I would have liked more. Like, I always want more from novellas. Well, and it wasn't even really a novella, but just, yeah, but I really like T.J. Kingfisher's writing. I feel like she has such a kind of almost tongue-in-cheek type style of writing. It's just, it's very light-hearted, but also she sort of deals with some kind of good themes as well at the same time. So yeah, I've enjoyed her books. Well, I've only read 2 of them, but I've enjoyed them, what I've read. Okay, then after that I read Winterkeep, which I loved, and that is the 4th book in the Graceling series by Kristen Kershaw. So I gave this one 5 stars, and honestly it might be my favourite Graceling book, or certainly like tied with Fire. Yeah, I just feel like it had the perfect balance of like old characters, so you had that like nostalgia, but then also new characters, and the new storyline was amazing. So we're following, so from the old characters, we're following Bitterblue and Gideon. So Bitterblue, she's the queen of this country called Mone, and basically some of her ambassadors go missing when they've been to this other kind of country that's just been discovered, called Winterkeep. So Bitterblue decides to go to investigate what happened to her ambassadors that kind of mysteriously died, and she goes with Gideon, who is like her, I don't really know what he is to her, but just advisor maybe, but just, I was not a Bitterblue and Gideon like shipper in Bitterblue, because I love Saf. But in this book I was so invested in them, and just the whole like angst, and there were scenes where I was nearly tearing up, because just and then they kind of get separated at one point, but they have each other like as a voice in their head, like, and just that just made me so soft. Yeah, so I loved their relationship and how it blossomed in this book, and we also find out a little bit about what happened to Saf, and I love him. But yeah, I feel like I'm quite glad Bitterblue and Gideon sort of ended up in that direction, because I feel like Saf and Bitterblue were kind of very much a first love type story in Bitterblue, whereas in this one it feels a lot more mature. And then we're also following Lovisa, who is this new character, and she is kind of, so she lives in Winterkeep, and her family is kind of very interesting. And so Lovisa's kind of this student at this academy, but her family, so her mother is sort of this important like political figure for the party called the Scholars, and then her father is an important political figure for the party called the Inventors, and they're very much at odds with each other, like in public, but they're kind of very passionate in private. But within the family, so there's Lovisa and then her mother and father called Furla and Benny, and then Lovisa has like 3 younger brothers as well. But at home it's very kind of abusive household, and at first you think it's the mother who's kind of the abuser, and well, she is, because she like locks them in rooms and like starves them and stuff. But you also find out, so Lovisa's always seen her father as kind of her like saviour, but then you also find out really her father's not been doing anything for her, and just sort of lets her mother like do all these bad things, and he's also a trash father. And also he kind of is quite like the political villain almost as well. And in a way Furla, the mother, she's almost trying to protect them at the same time, so it's very layered. And also Lovisa sort of has this kind of torn, because she like loves her parents, but she's also realizing she's kind of been abused by them, and I feel like that's sort of well done. Like there's a lot of, I feel like I read a lot of books about kind of domestic abuse because there's a couple more coming as well, and I feel like it was well done with the kind of balance of that, and just Lovisa and how the way she'd been raised really impacted her, and how she feels the way she kind of approaches relationships with other people. I think you see how her sort of childhood has impacted her, and I thought that was so kind of well written. And then also I liked how Lovisa and Bitterblue's storylines kind of interact and how they sort of weave together. I don't quite want to say it because I feel like it's good if you don't know what's coming in the book, but yeah, I really loved it. And just some of the things that happen, like some of the things Lovisa does are like really shocking, and it is so good. And then also there's these little telepathic foxes things. The main one we follow is called Adventure, and he's sort of Furla's fox, but also he sort of is working against Furla, but he has to keep that secret because that would be like betraying the secrets of fox kind. And he's so cute, but also he's so like such a hero, and oh, I love him, and he was so cute. And yeah, and we also as well get this kind of mysterious storyline following the keeper, who's like this mysterious sea creature, and I also really like that, the like whole sea creature type dynamic. So yeah, I really love Winterkeep, and if you like the Graceling series I'd really recommend it, and if you haven't started the Graceling series I would also really recommend reading it. So yeah, I feel like actually there were some books this year which like came out which really didn't need to, like A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and Midnight Sun, but I feel like this one, it really felt necessary, and I feel like it really kind of tied into the original series well, and sort of added to it, and added almost like, especially for kind of Bitterblue's arc, a bit of like maturity and sort of not quite closure but just development. And I feel like it was a really like good addition to the series to have, and also I feel like it sets up potentially future books as well, especially with Harther, who's Bitterblue's kind of half sister. Yeah, I would love more books because I really like the series, and the world is so cool. Like the Graces are really cool. So yeah, and also there's this thing called Zilphium, which is like this mysterious substance which is kind of almost being used, and there's these like conspiracies surrounding it. So that was really interesting as well. Just tagged that on there. Okay, then after that I read A Tangle of Spells, which is the 3rd book in the A Pinch of Magic series by Michelle Harrison. And I read this one as an arc as well. I think this comes out in like February or March. I can't remember which exactly. But I really enjoyed this one. I think A Pinch of Magic is still probably my favourite. But yeah, this one was really good. It was kind of different from the other two because I feel like the other two were kind of set in like Crowstone on this island with these like mists. And it gave me major like kind of Whitby vibes. But this one, their sisters have moved to this kind of village called Pendlewick. And they're sort of living in this almost haunted house, and that was so cool, like those sort of vibes. And it's very kind of witchy, and there's these like witches in the village, and the village kind of almost has this like curse on it, and none of the villagers really, they're all kind of like got their blinders on. But essentially what happens is Betty and Charlie are the only ones who like escape this kind of curse thing, and so they have to like take it into their own hands and like solve this mystery, which is kind of ensorcerelled all the other characters. So yeah, it was really good and really enjoyable. I always love middle grade, and like I love the 3 Widdersham sisters, they're great. I feel like I maybe would have liked a bit more like dynamic between them and them all working together in this book, but also I feel like because of the plot that couldn't really happen. But yeah, no, I really liked the lore of the sort of the village, and like finding out what happened to these other like women and witches, and these kind of, these women had sort of, certain characters in the past had sort of been kind of accused of being witches, and then very much sort of been attacked, and how that sort of played into like history. And I just really enjoyed it. So yeah, that was really good. Okay, then I read the next 2 books in the like, what's it called, the like Raera Chronicles or something, the kind of prequel series to the Theft of Swords series. So it's basically just a series where I followed like Royce and Hadrian on their kind of adventures as they were kind of growing together as a Raera, like their kind of bandit duo thing. They're not bandits, I don't even know what they are, like thieves for hire, I guess. So this is the 3rd one, because I read the other 2 like ages ago in March or something. So in the 3rd one, they go to this place, and they've kind of been hired to tell the people how they would assassinate this Lady Dulgath, in order to try and prevent her being actually assassinated, because she's in danger. But it's all very like twisted and kind of convoluted, and I really enjoyed this one because it has such a good like almost ghosty like possession type storyline, which was so cool. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. And also I love Royce and Hadrian's dynamic. They're just iconic. They're just like the epitome of grumpy sunshine, and just the whole like, I don't know, I just love them. Yeah, and then the second one, The Disappearance of Winter's Daughter, which is where they kind of get hired to investigate the disappearance of this kind of noblewoman called Jenny Winter, and she yeah, she's gone missing, but she's also a really interesting character to follow because we also get her kind of POV, and then Royce and Hadrian kind of investigating that, and in this like new city called Rochelle, but there's also a lot of kind of political strife in Rochelle with the kind of the elves and the dwarfs, or the elves are called Muir, they're like half elves, they're not actual elves, and so they sort of are always trying to cause this like rebellion in the city, and then Royce and Hadrian kind of get involved, and yeah, so I just really enjoyed both of them. I gave them both 4 stars. Yeah, it's a really fun series. I don't think I like it quite as much as the like Theft of Swords series or the Legends of the First Empire series, but yeah, no, they're really good, and they're really good audiobooks. I love Tim Gerard Reynolds, the audiobook narrator. So yeah, that was really fun. Okay, then after that I read A Winter's Orbit, which I gave 5 stars. I love this book so much. It just has the perfect balance of like romance and humour and politics and just everything that I love. It's just so good. So it's kind of a cross between like Red, White and Royal Blue, but in space, and also kind of has a similar like political situation and setup to A Memory Called Empire. So we're following Kiem, who's like this prince, and he gets told by the emperor that he's going to be married, like an arranged marriage, to this other character called Jayen. And Jayen was like previously married to Kiem's cousin called Tam, but Tam mysteriously dies. So there's kind of like, they're kind of investigating what happened to Tam, and they have to be in this arranged marriage because in order to like satisfy this treaty, because there's this like overarching galactic force called the Resolution who like want the treaty sort of sorted and want them to prove that they're sort of their 2 countries, because Jayen's like this ambassador to this other country, are like getting along. So yeah, so that's kind of, and then we're just kind of watching them in their like arranged marriage and like grow closer. I'm a sucker for the arranged marriage trope. Yeah, and also Kiem, so Kiem's like this very kind of sunshiny, like confident, charming type prince. He reminds me a lot of Adolin, which also obviously I love him, and he's kind of helping to bring Jayen out of his shell a little bit, but Jayen's very kind of timid and diminished because he's sort of been in this previous abusive relationship. But just watching Jayen kind of realise what's happened to him and acknowledge it and sort of grow from it, I think is really good. And then I think Kiem's a nice counterpoint because he's very like supportive, but he's not kind of too like pushy, and he doesn't try to like save him, he just kind of is there for him. And I feel like that's a really nice kind of contrast, and just he's just such a like kind character, and oh yeah, he just reminds me of Adolin. But yeah, no, I'm watching Jian kind of grow and realize and like come into himself. It's so good, and the whole political thing is really well written as well. Like with this kind of it becomes this almost like conspiracy, and it's so good. So I really enjoyed that one. I'd really highly recommend get pre-ordering. It's probably one of my favorite books I read this month, as along with Winterkeep, and just yeah, it's just that kind of like comforting sci-fi that just hits you in the feels, and it's just. I could not put it down. I like read it all day because I could not stop, and just I was so invested in a relationship. I was so invested in like this situation, and just it played into so many tropes which I love. There was almost like, you know, when like one character gets really cold, and so they get there's one point where they get kind of stranded in the wilderness, and then Kiam gets really cold because he like ends up in the river or something, and then they have to like snuggle together, and yeah, it was so precious. So I really enjoyed that. Yeah, just you want like comforting sci-fi. It's just yeah. Okay, then after that I read Bearhead by Adrian Chbosky, and I believe this one comes out in January, so it's another arc. And yeah, so I gave this one 3.75 stars, I think, or maybe 3.5, which I enjoyed this one more than I was expecting. I feel like Adrian Chbosky always really excels on the like political themes. So we're following the character Jimmy, and he's kind of this like he works on Mars as like part of a terraforming project, and he likes his drugs, or I can't remember exactly what the type of drug is called. Essentially, in order to get money, he sort of goes to this like Sugar character. She's called Sugar, and she sort of gives him this hardware to like put in his brain to like keep it safe, in exchange for money. But this hardware turns out to be this like actual sentient character called Honey, and she sort of is talking to Jimmy, and she sort of is involved in this like big political conspiracy thing. So Jimmy sort of ends up involved, and things start happening, and you're also following on Earth this kind of this assistant, this politician who's very kind of reminiscent of Donald Trump, and like he's very like and so that's interesting, and then how that ties into the sort of situation on Mars as well. So I thought it was really interesting. I feel like maybe to give it a higher rating, I would have liked to have been a bit more invested in the characters. Yeah, but I thought the plot was really interesting. And yeah, it did take me a while to get into, but I feel like once I was into it, I was quite into it. So yeah. And after that, I read Raera, which was our book club pick. Is here. I'll stop being lazy and get it out. Oh dear, we're at 50 minutes already. But I've only got a couple more books to talk about, so yeah, so this was our book club pick for the Chaos Rising book club, which I hosted with my friends Tammy, Rue and Sophia, and I'll leave their channels linked down below, and also our discussion for this book. So in the book we're following Tarasai, and she is sort of been raised by this her mother, who's this like mysterious character called the Lady. Her mother's quite like far away, not far away, that's not the right word, like distanced, and then one day she sends Tarasai to like the capital to become part of the like prince's council, but with the order to kill the prince once Tarasai kind of gets anointed to him. So the prince has this like council of 11 people, and they're all kind of like sworn to him, and they kind of share their minds through this magical power called the Ray. So essentially Tarasai has been sent to like kill him, which is it's a really interesting dynamic, and it has this really interesting sort of dynamic between the council and them all having this sort of power, which I really liked. And I also really liked how kind of magical this book was. I think I was expecting more like political drama, but actually there's quite a lot of magic, which I really enjoyed. And also there's this trope which I'm kind of a real sucker for, which is like where you have kind of almost two generations, and the kind of older generation is very much tied into what's happening to the young generation and them having that kind of power, and I really enjoyed that. So, and that kind of happens here, and the sort of climax of the book, almost the kind of really eventful things sort of are the older generation, and that just impacting on Tarasai and her friends. And yeah, so I just really loved it. The like rooftop scene was just iconic, yeah, and Tarasai was a great main character, and I really liked her love interest as well, Sanji, and I was so invested in their relationship at the start. I feel like it petered off towards the end a little bit, and also I think I would have liked a tiny bit more at the beginning, just about Tarasai's Teresa's childhood and her dynamic with the lady, because I feel like they have such an interesting dynamic. Like, it's very a complicated mother-daughter relationship, and that was so interesting. I just really kind of watching it unfold, and just, yeah, it was very good. And yeah, so I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. Okay, then I also read She Who Became the Sun, which I gave 4.75 stars. And this one is an arc. I don't think it comes out till July. I'll probably reread it when it comes out. And I really enjoyed this one. So we're following Zoo, who's like this monk. And when she's a child, her like father and brother get killed in this like raid. This isn't a spoiler, by the way. It's like the first chapter, or the first couple of pages. And so she then goes to this monastery in order to kind of save herself and get fed and stuff. But in order to do that, she has to take on like her brother's kind of name and persona, and become Zoo, and this like boy, and also she's wanting Zoo's fate, because she's been told her fate is like nothing, but Zoo's fate is greatness. So she's, throughout the book, she's kind of running from this fate of like nothingness, and she's very ambitious and very driven, and yeah, and she kind of, she's also very like, her character is so like cheeky, and just, she's such a great character to follow. You really root for her, even though she's very, she's very like ruthless. She will do anything for like power. But the way she goes about it, she's so like charming at the same time. And I believe she's kind of non-binary as well, or very kind of gender defiant, because she uses like she pronouns, but also when she's talking about herself as the like monk, she talks about herself as a he. And there's a lot of kind of discussion around, she doesn't feel like that kind of comfortable in a female body, and like she doesn't really feel like she is a woman, and she doesn't really feel like she's a man either. So she kind of like that, and that's an interesting sort of look at as well at gender roles, but also at kind of gender identity. And yeah, and then her kind of, we also follow Ma, who's this she's kind of engaged to this general at the start of the book, but then she kind of meets Zoo, and they have kind of a ensuing romance, which is so cute, and is kind of the way it progresses in a certain way, and I really liked it. It does happen kind of fast, but also it sort of fits what's happening in the book. And then the ending, oh, there's a scene at the end which just, oh yeah, that was so good. And yeah, just watching Zoo kind of grow and like really sort of become who she's like meant to be, and become comfortable in her own body, and like with this power and this drive, and sort of become comfortable in her own fate as well, and sort of not that taking her fate into her own hands, that type of thing. Like, you can be passive and have what happens to you, but if you like grab hold and like take action, then that's when like you'll achieve truly great things. That was very cheesy. Yeah, so I really like that, and I really like this sort of historical setting. And at the same time, we're also following these other characters. Main one is Uang. I might be saying that wrong. Yeah, and he's such a frustrating character, honestly. Like, I flipped between liking him and hating him so much. And I think I don't really know how I feel about him at the moment. Just, yeah, he's very frustrating. And he's very much like out for revenge. And he's kind of on the opposing side to Zoo and Ma. But towards the end, he sort of, there's some kind of underhanded plotting going on, and yeah, so I feel like the politics is really well done, and the whole situation is very like complex, and there's a lot of sort of betrayals going on, and you don't really know like who's going to be in charge and who's like out for what, and like motivations are very mysterious. And yeah, so it's a really good book. I would highly recommend it. It's so well written as well. Like, the writing is very kind of, it's like beautiful writing, but it's not like super poetic. It's just kind of a perfect balance. I feel like I don't like super flowery writing, but I like quite kind of pretty writing, and this one is very much that. Yeah, and then finally I read Ruin, which I've been reading this book since August. Nicole, I hope you're proud of me. I'm very proud of myself for finishing. Yeah, I'm not gonna get it out, it's down here, because this shelf is like all wedged in super tight. So if I get anything out, it would be a challenge to get back in. But yeah, so this is the third book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, and I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. Obviously it took me a long time to read. I feel like that's just because I kept prioritizing other things, but I really enjoyed it, especially the end. Like, I think I read the last like 300 pages in just a single day. Yeah, just kind of following, but I feel like there was a lot of sort of battle scenes, and if you like military, like battle type things, then you'll really like this series. But I feel like in this book there was almost too much of it, and just sometimes I wanted a little bit more time with the characters rather than just constantly like fighting. But I do love the characters, especially Camlin. I love Camlin, and I was so proud of Veridus in this book. Oh, even though he had to be told, but still, I was proud of him. And Corbin's a great main character. He's very much like the classic kind of hero farm boy type character, but he's really sweet, and also he's kind of, yeah, he's just trying to do his best. And yeah, Sven, his sister, I love her as well. I feel like we didn't get a huge amount of her in this book, but I did really like the kind of healer side of her, which I love healers. And the ending, the ending just like emotionally ruined me, to use the word term of the book, because it ends on quite a cliffhanger for the next book, I think. But yeah, just the last line is heartbreaking. Oh. Yeah, so no, it was I feel like the way everything tied together at the end was really well done as well. And there were certain storylines which I definitely like more. Like, I love Camlin's storyline. I love Camlin in general. But yeah, with the like marshes, I love the marshy setting. And the foresty setting as well, because one of the storylines they kind of go into this like magical forest. Yeah, so no, I enjoyed that one, but I don't think it's my favourite in the series, so we're just gonna leave it there. I know I didn't talk about that one very well, but it's been an hour. I'm tired, and I already filmed 4 videos before this, so you know. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what your favourite book that you read in December was, and I would love to know. And yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I've lost the willpower to live after filming. Yeah, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I hope you're all having a great day, and I will see you next time.